There are three surprising camp battles that we will be watching this year. We'll tell you which ones they are next.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. And joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. And on today's show, we're taking a look at three, we're going to call them surprising camp battles that we are going to be paying attention to over the summer. Atlanta, let's start at the strong safety position, because I think for most people, they've just penciled in Malik Hooker and Donovan Wilson as the starting safeties for, is this the third year in a row? Fourth year in a row? It's hard to believe the Cowboys have had the same safety duo for this long.
Steady safety play, frankly, at all. Crazy. It's hard to believe.
But I'm not convinced that that's going to be the starting duo to open the year.
Well, I think it's surprisingly steady, safety play. Let's back up just 1 second, because I do think that one of the reasons that we're bringing this up, and I think this is a relevant conversation, is because you have a change in the guard on both sides of the ball, right? You have a new offensive coordinator, new head coach, and you have a new defensive coordinator. So they're going to have different takes on these players. Obviously, Schottenheimer knows these players maybe a little bit better than Eberflus does. But that doesn't mean he doesn't have a different opinion than the previous administration. So they're going to look at these guys different. And I think strong safety is a great spot to start at, because like you said, we've kind of grown accustomed to the idea that these two guys have been the starters and Wilson and Hooker for the last few years through multiple administrations now. And I think the difference now is that they are all both a 1 year older. Wilson especially seems to be kind of getting a little bit longer in the tooth. And I think what we've seen from Wilson is a high variance of play. And that's kind of been his thing, right? And in his best years, he's found a way to raise the floor on that, and while still continuing to make big plays. I think as these last few years have started to go on, you started to see him kind of fall back to a little bit of what we've seen early in his career, where it's just wildly swinging back and forth. He's giving up big plays. He's making big plays. And I think, the other thing about it is that you've also got two guys underneath these two safeties in Wanye Thomas and Marquise Bell, who both have come in and played significant snaps and played very well when given the opportunity. So it's been a while now. And obviously Marquise Bell got an opportunity to play linebacker, but Wanye Thomas hasn't gotten really the kind of long look that we would like to see at the position. And I'd love to see him, now that he's re-signed a deal, get an opportunity to kind of go head to head with Wilson specifically this training camp, to see if maybe he can take that job.
I think regardless of what happens in camp, you're going to see the Cowboys rotate their safeties. Last year we had Donovan Wilson played 1,000 snaps and Malik Hooker played 1,062. I don't anticipate it being like that again. Do you? I would have to assume that Eberflus is going to want to try to get some different guys in, at least on the field.
I would have to imagine. I mean, just like they're both getting older, and just kind of consistently relying on them. And frankly, let's be honest, two guys who have had injury problems at different parts of their careers to continue to play such a high number. I mean, if you want to kind of continue to lengthen their careers and continue to have Wilson and Hooker, I think at the very least, you're going to need to start kind of supplementing them on some of these downs just to kind of extend their careers a little bit.
Do you know how many snaps Wanye played on defense last year?
I don't actually. I don't really have a good sense of that.
93. He played way more in 2023 than he did in 2024. For whatever reason, Mike Zimmer just did not like Wanye Thomas. I wouldn't be surprised that with Matt Eberflus, with kind of what he prefers at safety, I wouldn't be shocked to see Wanye be the more preferred option, because I just think he's a little bit more versatile than what Donovan Wilson is, because He can play in the slot. Now, I don't think you want him to be there full time, but he can do that. He can play in the box. He can play as a free safety. He has some corner experience. I just wonder, we're at the point where Donovan Wilson's over the age of 30. Wanye Thomas is 20. He's going to be 25 here in a couple of weeks. Maybe it's where, they start to pass each other.
You think about what Quinn liked to do. He liked to do a lot of cover 3, cover 1 stuff. So that's a lot of single safety high stuff. That means he likes having a guy in the box, and that was usually Donovan Wilson. You think about what Zimmer likes to do. He likes to blitz these guys, right? So that's one of the best things that Donovan Wilson does. Mm-hmm. I think that neither one of those things necessarily. Well, I mean, I think there's cover 3 aspects of that as well. But I think that, as the years have gone on, I think Wanye Thomas potentially catches up to Wilson's usefulness there a little bit because of the coverage ability. And now that you're not blitzing as much, you look at Wilson and you wonder, is he quite as valuable under Eberflus as he was Zimmer? So I think it may kind of even up the race a little bit once we get to training camp and make this a pure competition about, who's the better overall safety.
Now, we should mention, is there any chance that a Marquise Bell, who's back to safety, or a Israel Makamu, who the Cowboys brought back, any chance that one of those guys beats out Donovan Wilson and Wanye Thomas?
Absolutely. I mean, I think Bell is a guy that has more experience than Wanye Thomas, right? Has played, obviously that's at linebacker, but if we're talking about playing more of a box role, a guy who could step out and maybe cover in the slot a little bit, I think Bell can still do that as well. I certainly think that it could very well be a competition between Thomas and Bell. I just think that Thomas is a little bit more of a versatile player, right? Okay. I think Wilson is probably the more likely analog for the position. Like if you're looking for a more 1-for-1 replacement for Wilson, I think it's actually Bell. But I think Wanye Thomas is the more versatile of the replacement backups, let's say safeties, that if he actually took the job, you could just do more things with him, especially with Hooker, who's also a very versatile player.
Well, what's funny is the player that's the most versatile out of all these guys is Israel Makamu, who they just refused to play for whatever reason. But the Cowboys brought him back for another year. He's got experience at safety, corner, slot corner, wherever you want to play him. I would love to see Makamu, because anytime he's played well, Absolutely. Including in the playoffs.
Yeah,
I would love to see the Cowboys give him, a bigger role. But I wonder if they like him, Landon, more in this utility role. He's our last guy that's active, and he can just fill in if we have a bunch of injuries, and that's kind of his job.
Last thing, do you think that there's an opportunity that, let's say the Cowboys fill the nickel role another way, either by veteran or Bland. Yeah, he comes in and they like the outside guys, and then you get Diggs back, and suddenly Bland is your nickel corner. Suddenly you've got McCool, who you like a lot, you want to play. Do you move him also to safety and then maybe dangle Donovan Wilson as a trade option for some team that's looking to kind of improve their safety situation? I wonder at what point you look at that kind of safety nickelback room and wonder if you don't have almost too many bodies to kind of fit or to play all at once. I understand it's sacrilege to say that you have too many bodies in the defensive back position, but this isn't corner, this is safety. No. So I do wonder if there isn't a team that maybe is valuing your kind of limited, single dimension safety more than you are if that room suddenly gets very crowded.
It's possible, but if you're trading Donovan Wilson, you're trading him for like a 6th or 7th round pick.
Yeah.
And the reason why you would make a trade like that is because you just want to open snaps up for guys like Wanye Thomas, or maybe the idea is Wanye Thomas is our starter, but we want Marquise Bell and Izzy Makamu to be our primary backups. They play more on special teams, and we can save a little bit of money doing that.
And I also think that, listen, I mean, as we've seen, if Wilson is going to start to kind of revert back to the player that he was previously early in his career, that was an actually great role for him as the third safety, because it limited his exposure on the field. You kind of managed to get a lot more of the upside out of him without the overexposing him at times. So that might work.
All right, let's talk about another position battle that we are anticipating being maybe a little bit louder than what anybody thinks. Let's talk about the tight end battle next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there has never been a better time to get in on the action. And FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. I love the NBA futures market. You can go bet on who you think is going to win the NBA championship, who's going to be the finals MVP. It's all there on FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head over to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. And if it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's show, we're discussing 3 position battles that we are going to be watching during training camp. Landon, let's go to the tight end job because I think there's not a lot. Most people are just penciling in Jake Ferguson to win that job. And anytime I bring it up on Twitter, there's a bunch of people that get angry about it because they said Ferguson, he dealt with a knee injury. He was really good in 2023. Just watch. He'll be great this year. I hope that happens.
Me too. Yeah.
But I'm not ruling out the possibility that it's either more of a committee approach, which we saw last year, by the way. Jake Ferguson, 614 snaps. Luke Schoonmaker, 411 snaps. Brevin Spanford, 304 snaps. And then Hunter Lipke, 328, if you want to count him as a tight end. Clearly, Brian Schottenheimer does. Is there a chance that Ferguson doesn't win this job?
Yes, I do think that there's a chance of that. I also think that this is a wider conversation than just about Ferguson and his job. I think that all 3 spots are open, right? And I think that these 3 guys. Look, here's the take here. I think all 3 of these guys are going to play and are going to play a lot. I don't think that this is a case where they're fighting for their roster spot or they're fighting for their game day roster. No. I think all 3 of these guys are making the team and are going to be rostered every single week because they're going to get used a lot, because I think that we're going to use more tight ends this season. And I also think that regardless of, winning competitions, I think that there's a high likelihood that they're just going to use all 3 of these guys a lot, because I think they like these guys a lot and they all are a little bit different. So I think, to start with the Ferguson situation, look, Ferguson had a bad year last year. I don't think it was just about the knee. I think that was part of it for sure. It certainly helped compound the problems, but he didn't look great when he was healthy either. And so I think that I'm hoping and counting on Ferguson coming back and being the Ferguson of 2023 and of 2022, of him getting back on that trajectory. But you can't only solely rely on that. Listen, I am the one who gets told all the time that hope is not an option or a solution, right? So I think you have to open up this situation, let them all compete. I understand that it's the one coaching situation where you have the same coach, so he does know all 3 of these guys. It's not like there's any new angles here. I think the new angles are, Schoonmaker has another year of experience. He took a pretty decent sized step, I would say, last season.
Think so. Yeah.
I think Spanford sounds like he's taken a step. So I think it's, for Ferguson, it's about getting back to where he was. And then for Schoonmaker and Brevin Spanford, I think it's about them each of them taking a big step towards where Ferguson was previous. So I think you've got 3 guys that are probably a lot closer than we all have expected. And I think it's going to be a pretty open competition. Like I said, up and down the roster. And listen, we can't rule out, John Stevens Jr., who they had really, really high hopes for, specific plans for as a weapon in the red zone. They also got 2. They like Princeton Fant a lot, though I think he actually just got hurt, if I'm not mistaken.
I think he's okay. He'll be fine. But they signed 2. They signed 2 undrafted free agents, Tyler Neville and Rivaldo Fairweather, this offseason as well.
And I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong, that Fairweather, I think, got the first or second most amount of money of all the undrafted free agents. So they liked him a lot.
Went to school?
War Eagle. Of course, I know where he went to school. I think these guys. These guys are. I mean, I played college football 26. I spammed that guy all the time.
Yeah, there you go.
I think these guys. They're planning on playing a lot of tight ends. I think they're planning on rotating these tight ends. And I don't know that right now Ferguson is getting a huge amount of deference over everybody else, and I don't know that he necessarily should.
Who do you think will be the best blocking tight end of this group by week 1?
That's a good question. I think that's one of the big things we really do need to find out, right? I think my gut wants to say Brevin Spanford because he's the biggest, most physical guy, and I think, he's shown some ability there. But I also think that there's a good chance that if Schoonmaker had a really good offseason, that he's not only the most balanced tight end of these three, but also the best blocker.
The reason I bring that up is because in week 1 against the Eagles and then week 2 against the Giants, 2 of the best pass rushes in the NFL, you're going to be starting a second-year left tackle in Tyler Guyton, a first-year right guard in Tyler Booker, and a second-year center in Cooper Beebe, and a fourth-year guard in Tyler Smith. You might just need to have the best blockers on the field to kind of help that unit out. Mm-hmm. I think the offensive line is going to be fine in time, but there could be some rough spots early on as this group gels, and maybe you sacrifice a little bit in the passing game to get the better run blockers on the field or just the better pass blockers overall. Not to mention, Dak is coming off a hamstring injury, so I think you're going to want to make sure that he's protected really well. And when you've got 2 receivers like CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens, maybe it's okay to go with a lesser receiving option for a better blocker.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point, is that it certainly makes you more comfortable with only lining up with 2 wide receivers when those 2 wide receivers are George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb, as opposed to Jalen Tolbert and CeeDee Lamb. I think it's just a better pairing, obviously.
Let me ask you this before we move on. If you're a Cowboy fan, and obviously you are because you're listening to Locked On Cowboys, or maybe you're an Eagle fan.
I'm a co-host of a podcast called Locked On Cowboys. Yeah.
There you go. Who do you want to win the tight end job? Like, who has the highest ceiling here to work out?
That's a good question. I mean, I think it's Schoonmaker, because if Schoonmaker earns the job, he's the best athlete of all of these, because he's the best combination of size and athleticism. And frankly, even if you're calling Jake Ferguson the athletic version, he's a better athlete than Jake Ferguson at a bigger size. So
he's more lumbering than what Jake Ferguson is, but he, like, straight line speed, he is the better athlete.
And I think also for what we want the tight end to be doing in this offense, which is more of like a seam ball, goal line, like red zone targeting kind of guy, as opposed to Jake Ferguson has been great as a yak guy, but that kind of feeds on what CeeDee Lamb really ultimately does.
They kind of occupy the same space a lot of times.
So it's good to have a Schoonmaker who's a little bit of a bigger target that you can throw those seam balls better near the red zone, you'd hope. So I think that's why he might be a better fit schematically for how you want to use the tight end. Not that Jake Ferguson I also think that Jake Ferguson would be a fantastic tight end too. That's what it is. I think, to me, Jake Ferguson fits the body and role type of a tight end too better than he does as a lead tight end. So that's why I need Schoonmaker to take that job, not just like have Ferguson like fail out of it necessarily.
All right, let's talk about one more job that could be up for grabs during training camp, and that is the defensive tackle, nose tackle, one technique, whatever you want to call it, job. Is Mazi Smith a lock to start? We will get to that next. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Scouting Show. As training camps get closer and moves are being made, host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Landon, the last one here is the defensive tackle spot next to Oso Odighizuwa. Nick Harris from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram wrote an article on Wednesday saying that basically Mazi Smith is not a lock to start. This is a kind of a make or break year for him. Do you think this one's actually up for grabs?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that in the sense that Mozzie's job is not untouchable, right? Like he hasn't done anything that's like necessarily locked his job in. I think he will obviously get first go, and he'll have to fail out of that spot. Or Toa or whoever they're suggesting is coming to
Toya.
take for that.
Yeah.
Toya will take that job from him. So I would have to say that I think it's not going to be like an open competition situation. I think Mozzie's going to very clearly be the guy to line up there, but I don't think they're going to look past someone who's playing better than Mazi if that's the situation. I think if he is a first round pick, and I think that does happen with a first round pick.
Yes.
But I also think that he's well worn past that, and that was also 2 defensive coordinators ago. So I think that the first round pick, anointment or whatever you want to call it, the get out of jail free card or whatever, the hall pass that you get for being a first round pick, I think that's probably expired at this point. They need to make sure that solution that nose tackle position has a solution.
It's, in my opinion, it's going to be Mazi Smith week 1 against the Eagles. However, I will say, I think, and this is really funny, I think if he doesn't win the starting job, I wouldn't be surprised to see him not on the roster, because if he doesn't win the job, it likely means that a 7th round pick beat him out. And that's just really hard to fathom when you consider how hard it is for 7th round picks to, first of all, make the team and then at defensive tackle come in and be starters. If Mozzie's not the starter, it means they basically have given up on him. And at that point, why even have him on the roster? But I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's going to be the starter because he's probably going to be the best option. I think we saw strides from him last year. We'll see if this new scheme helps him out. I think it will.
I think it will. That's one thing I want to say real quick. I think that this scheme is really set up well to fit what he does well. I think you look at how Eberflus used oh man, I just completely lost his name. The kid from Baylor that's the Chicago nose tackle.
Oh,
right
Andrew Billings.
Billings. Yes, I think I think you look at how Eberflus deployed Billings, and that's very much how Mazi is going to be deployed. And I think that kind of plays back into the way that Mazi wants to play. He wants to play square. He wants to get be physical. He wants to attack sinners, and make them deal with him. So I think you're not forcing him to be some sort of elite pass rusher or a guy that's trying to get through the gap. You're just having him there to destroy blocking schemes, destroy the middle of blocking schemes, and then allow the linebackers to play in the havoc of that. And I think that's something that Mazi can do.
We also saw Mazi just be a much better player last year when Micah Parsons was on the field. Like, shocking. Like, that's when you have a guy that can create pressure on the outside and defenses are having to adjust everything to that guy, you don't face as many double teams. But I anticipate Mazi being the starter. I think the only question is his backup one of the late day 3 picks, or is it a veteran that they sign during camp or after camp? Do they bring back Linval Joseph? Do they have to make a trade? That's the only real question for me. But again, I would be fairly shocked if Mazi Smith is not the week 1 starter.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing too about Mazi and some of these other nose tackles is that, like, I do think that if you needed Mazi to do some other things as a pass rusher or just be, on the field for third down to push the pocket, like he can do some of those things that maybe some of these other nose tackles can't. So, I think that there is a chance where maybe the way that they use Mazi is they do use him on some of these passing downs a little bit more often, and they actually rotate him on early downs with Toa if they like him a lot. Or I wouldn't be shocked if they didn't if they found a way to rotate him because they wanted to use him in different ways as opposed to just the typical nose tackle guy, because I do think he has a level of athleticism beyond a typical nose tackle, or at least the guy that you would kind of get off the street that's just a plugger like they're asking him to be. So I think that's probably more likely than than him being straight out beaten or him being a backup to Toa or something like that. Because you're right. I think, him being cut seems like it could be just as likely in that situation, because it would have to be such a situation where he fell off so badly or just had such an
he's underweight,
disheartening
offseason.
Yeah, exactly. Where that like, it's like, okay, we're kind of done. And
like if
move on.
7th round picks who, guys that have major flaws like Toya does, or we like Jay Toya a lot, but for him to come in and beat out Mazi Smith probably says more about Mazi than it does Toya.
Yeah, I mean, even if you consider him to be a steal in the 7th round, or a guy that should be a more mid-round pick, a 4th round pick coming in and stealing the job from Mazi Smith would be shocking. So yeah, I think it doesn't really matter ultimately where Toya is taken. Any of these guys that are underneath him, Justin Rogers, any of these guys, if they showed up and suddenly were better than Mazi Smith, it would be an indictment on Mazi Smith.
No chance of a camp battle between the NFL's highest paid quarterback and PFF's highest graded quarterback, Joe Milton.
We compete every day. We go out.
No,
we know. No. Well, maybe a ping pong, but certainly not for the quarterback one spot, I don't think.
Real quick, any chance that we do see some competition for the QB2 job? Because Joe Milton obviously has the inside track, but I don't want to completely dismiss Will Greer either. Maybe they go with the more veteran quarterback.
Well, I certainly think it's possible early, right? They do have rules that would allow them to kind of hold on to him and carry the all 3 quarterbacks.
Yeah.
So they have ways to handle that, but I would imagine that's a job that's going to get handed off pretty quick.
All right, that's it for today's show. Go download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. We're going to break down some of the Thursday action from OTAs, so make sure you guys tune in then.